Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're looking at a really interesting paper called Reasoning with Sampling. Your base model is smarter than you think.
Mm.
And our mission here is to figure out why this is potentially such a big shift in how we get high-level reasoning out of LLMs.
It's a great title because it really cuts to the chase. For a long time, the standard playbook for getting models good at tricky stuff like math or coding or science questions, well, that involved post-training, usually reinforcement learning, RL, often with some kind of verifiable reward signal. Think RLVR, GRPO.
Right, the expensive stuff, complex pipelines, lots of data, lots of compute for training.
Exactly. Costly, complicated.
So this paper comes along and says, what, you don't need all that.
Pretty much. The core idea is you can skip that whole RL fine-tuning phase, and you can get results that are just as good, sometimes even better, straight from the original base model.
Just by changing how you sample from it at inference time.
That's the claim. No extra training, no data sets, no reward models.
Okay, so how? What's the magic?
They call it power sampling. It's basically an iterative sampling method. It uses techniques from statistical physics, actually, MCMC.
MCMC, Markov chain, Monte Carlo.
That's the one. And it's designed to sample from a specific target distribution they call P-bill$ to the power of alpha, palfadol.
Okay, so let's pause there for a sec. For anyone listening who needs the quick takeaway, the sort of short form summary, this power sampling method is training-free, dataset-free, verifier-free. It suggests that a lot of the reasoning ability we thought we had to train into models with RL, it's actually already there in the base model.
It's latent, yeah. You just need more compute at inference time and a smarter way to sample to sort of unlock it.
And crucially, they're saying you get this high accuracy without that notorious problem RL has with losing diversity.
Exactly. No diversity collapse. Which is a perfect place to dig in, actually. That whole RL context is key. RL has been the go-to for boosting performance on verifiable tasks, right? Math benchmarks, HumanEval for code. GRPO is kind of the standard method people compare against.
But there's always been this question lingering, hasn't there? Is RL genuinely teaching the model new reasoning skills? Or is it just, well, you called it distribution sharpening.
That's the term, yeah. Distribution sharpening.
So essentially making the model more confident about answers it could already generate, just maybe with lower probability, taking the base distribution BLRs and turning it into a sharper alpha GIF.
You got it. It focuses probability mass on the high likelihood, hopefully correct, reasoning paths. But the downside, as several studies have found, is that while your single best answer might get better,
your ability to generate different good answers goes down.
Right. The pass-it K-score, which measures if any of your top K samples are correct, often gets worse for larger K compared to just sampling from the base model.
So if the first guess is wrong, the next few are likely just slight variations of the same wrong idea. It gets stuck.
It collapses into narrow mode. So this paper says, okay, forget the RL fine-tuning. Let's just aim directly for that sharpened distribution to alpha, where alpha is greater than 1.
Okay, intuitively, raising the probability distribution to a power alpha $1 makes sense for sharpening. Higher probability sequences get amplified way more than lower probability ones. But hang on, people already use low-temperature sampling to make generation less random, more focused. Isn't that doing the same thing? Why the need for this whole alpha MCMC approach?
This is maybe the most subtle but really critical insight in the paper. The mathematics are different, and it makes a huge difference in practice. Low-temperature sampling works with an exponent of sums. Power sampling, sampling from alpha, works with a sum of exponents.
Okay, exponent of sums versus sum of exponents. That sounds pretty technical. Can you give us an analogy? How does that difference actually play out?
Sure, think about planning a route, like you're solving a multi-step math problem. Low-temperature sampling looks at the next step, the next token. It favors tokens that lead to lots of okay-ish future possibilities because it's averaging likelihoods before exponentiating. It's a bit greedy.
So it might pick a token that seems good now because it opens up many average paths, even if none of those paths are truly excellent or lead to the right final answer.
Exactly. It can get lured down paths that look promising initially, but ultimately dead-end and low-likelihood territory. Now, alpha sampling, the sum of exponents approach, it gives much more weight to paths that have maybe fewer options, but those options are extremely high likelihood down the line.
So it's implicitly doing more long-range planning. It's valuing the quality of the entire future path more than the sheer number of immediate options.
Precisely. It's better at identifying and sticking to a globally high likelihood path. The paper's observation 1 nails this. Alpha helps avoid those pivotal tokens, the tempting early choices that trap the model later.
Which is absolutely crucial for complex reasoning that requires maintaining coherence over many steps.
Right. You need to stay on that high likelihood track for the whole solution.
Okay, but now the practical side. You can't just calculate alpha dollars directly for sampling, right? Because
Right.
it's unnormalized. You'd have to sum probabilities over, well, basically every possible sequence the model could generate.
Totally intractable, exponentially complex, which is why they bring in MCMC.
Markov chain Monte Carlo. Can you give us the quick version for folks who aren't sampling experts? What does MCMC let them do here?
At its core, MCMC is a way to draw samples that look like they came from a really complex distribution, even when you can't normalize, without actually calculating that normalization constant. You set up this iterative process, a Markov chain, that eventually settles into a state where the samples it produces follow your target distribution, in this case to alpha dollar. They use the Metropolis-Hastings algorithm.
But even MCMC has issues with really long sequences, right? Like these reasoning traces. Doesn't it take forever to converge the mixing time problem?
It does if you try to do it over the whole sequence at once. So they use a clever trick, leveraging the fact that LLMs generate token by token, autoregressively. They break the generation into chunks, blocks of size, body dollars, and they run the MCMC process sequentially.
How does that work?
They define these intermediate target distributions for each block. The samples from finishing one block's MCMC process become the starting point for the next block's MCMC. It's like course correction block by block. Within each block's MCMC phase, they repeatedly propose changes to the tokens in that block and decide whether to accept the changes based on how likely the modified sequence is under the base model, aiming for that alpha target. This is the power sampling algorithm detailed in the paper.
So it's this iterative resampling within blocks that adds the extra compute cost.
Exactly. They estimate the total number of tokens the model has to process scales with the number of MCMC steps, NMCMC, and roughly the sequence length squared, 2-2, divided by that block size, 2 hours.
And they found the sweet spot experimentally.
Yeah, they landed on using alpha equals 4.0 and NMCMC equals 10 steps per block. Calculating it out, this adds about an 8.84x multiplier to the inference cost compared to standard greedy decoding.
Okay, 8.84x. That sounds like a lot, but let's put it in perspective.
Compared to what? Compared to potentially weeks of RL fine-tuning on a massive GPU cluster, maybe involving costly human feedback.
Right.
An 8.84x cost at inference time, paid only when you need that high-level reasoning versus a huge upfront training cost. It's a totally different economic model.
It shifts the cost from R&D and training infrastructure to operational inference costs. That's a really significant shift.
It really is.
Yeah.
Okay, so does it actually work? Let's talk results.
Yes, the proof is in the pudding. They tested this on models like Qwen 2.5, Phi 3.5. How did power sampling stack up against the base models and the RL-tuned GRPO versions?
Okay, so on the Math 500 benchmark, which was likely in the training data for the GRPO model, power sampling got very close. For example, Qwen 2.5 Math 7 with power sampling hit 0.748 accuracy. The GRPO version got 0.785. That's impressively close for a training-free method.
That is close, basically matching the specialized RL model on its home turf. But what about out-of-domain tasks? Does it generalize?
This is where it gets really interesting. On GPQA, it matched GRPO, but on HumanEval, the coding benchmark, big difference. Take 5.3.5 mini-instruct. The base model scored 0.213 on HumanEval pass at 1. Power sampling boosted that all the way up to 0.732.
Wow, okay. And GRPO, the RL fine-tuned version.
The GRPO version actually dropped performance on HumanEval down to 0.134.
Whoa, so the RL fine-tuning, presumably focused on math, actually made the model worse at coding.
It seems so. It suggests the RL process might overfit to its training objective and harm generalization. Power sampling, on the other hand, just unlocked the coding ability that was already latent in the base model.
That is a really powerful result. And does it work for less? Well, less verifiable tasks, like general helpfulness.
Yes, they check that too, using AlphaEval 2.0. And power sampling consistently beat GRPO there as well. So it's not just for tasks with clear right-wrong answers.
Okay, and back to that diversity point. Do they confirm power sampling avoids the pass at K drop-off?
They did. They plotted the pass at K curves. For power sampling, the accuracy keeps climbing nicely as you increase K. It's strictly better than both the base model and GRPO for K greater than 1.
So you get the high single-shot accuracy and you keep the diversity for multi-shot scenarios. Best of both worlds, like you said.
Pretty much. Another interesting finding, the reasoning traces themselves. Power sampling naturally generated much longer, more detailed reasoning steps, similar in length to the GRPO model, even though there's nothing explicitly telling it to be verbose.
So that detailed reasoning just emerges naturally from targeting the high likelihood alpha DAW distribution.
Seems that way. It correlates high likelihood with thoroughness, which makes sense for complex problems.
And is it fiddly to use, sensitive to hyperparameters?
Apparently not too bad.
Yep.
They showed performance was pretty stable once alpha was 2.0 or higher, and accuracy improved steadily as they increased the MCMC steps up to 10. So reasonably robust.
Oh, okay. So wrapping this up, what's the big picture takeaway here?
I think the main message is, wow, our base models are probably much more capable at reasoning than we realized. We've been held back by simple sampling methods like greedy decoding or even basic low-temperature sampling.
And this paper strongly connects strong reasoning ability with these high likelihood regions of the base model's distribution, regions that MCMC can effectively target.
Right. And practically speaking, it gives us power sampling a robust, training-free way to get that capability out. It could replace or at least supplement RL pipelines, especially where rewards are hard to define.
It fundamentally changes where we focus our effort, maybe less on massive training runs and more on efficient inference techniques.
Which leads nicely to the final thought, maybe something for you listening to ponder. Inference compute is getting cheaper, relatively speaking. The capabilities seem to be in the base models. So the next frontier is, how do we make these MCMC-based sampling techniques like power sampling much more efficient?
Can we tweak the model architecture itself or optimize things like the block size B or the MCMC steps in MCMC, maybe even dynamically? How do we cut down that, say, 8.84x overhead significantly?
Could we get the power of MCMC sampling closer to the speed of simple decoding? If we could, that would unlock a ton of latent potential in the models we already have.
A fascinating challenge, making smarter inference cheap. Definitely something to think about. All right, that's our deep dive for today. Thanks for joining us.